I became politicized at Wits University in 1948 when I was admitted. The newly elected nationalist government threatened to close the university to black people. There were a number, Nelson Mandela, Dr. Matlana, Dr. Mji, as Dumanokwe, and other blacks with whom I became associated at Wits. Dr. Malan was asked by a member of his party in Parliament what was going on at this university with students protesting. We were protesting. That's why I'm quite sympathetic about the protesters now. But Prime Minister of the country said to the Member of Parliament that the authorities at the university, which was not the only one, Cape Town, Rhodes, to a certain extent Natal, were also protesting about the threat. And I made a speech that was not very clever because I became an enemy of the governing party. Because I said, if wanting equal treatment of black students at the university made me a leftist, I was proud to be one. Because the Prime Minister had said that the university authorities had told him that not to worry, but it was merely a small group of leftists who were making the trouble. And I said, well, I was proud to be a leftist. I was deprived of the right to become a citizen until 1972. There was doubt as to whether I could be admitted as an advocate and take an oath as a non-South African citizen. And I met Nelson Mandela in particular, and I shared chambers with Duma Nokwe. I represented Nelson Mandela, Winnie Mandela, Godfrey Peachy, and shared chambers with Duma Nokwe. And I actually, because my father, who was elected mayor, elected in 1934 but was kicked out of office in 1937 because a dictator took over in Greece. And I didn't like dictatorships and didn't like non-democratic governments. And I made my feelings known. And it led to a close relationship by the small group of black lawyers in particular, which led to me defending people on small political cases and, of course, cases against the people at Rivonia trial, at defended Winnie Mandela, who tried to resuscitate the ANC in the late 60s. And I got a name of actually in the eyes of the government, particularly because I defended Bram Fischer together with Sidney Kentridge. The government thought that I was a member of the underground Communist Party. You couldn't be a member of the African National Congress at the time. I was followed. I was threatened by Prime Minister Foster, who sent his lawyer to tell me in Afrikaans that my rope was getting short. My rope was getting short whilst I was defending Bram Fischer. I was never a member of the African National Congress. I was never a member of the Communist Party. I wanted to be independent. I defended people, not only members of the African National Congress, but the Pan-Africanist Congress, the Black Conscience Movement, the Liberal Party. I wanted independence to really defend people in political cases, and not only political cases, but people who didn't have money. And I was briefed by Mandela and Tambo, I was briefed by Godfrey Peachy. I shared chambers with Dumanokwe, who went into exile because he was found in possession of documents. He was on the underground ANC after 1960. I became a very close friend of Nelson Mandela in particular. I was appointed by him to be his lawyer whilst he was in jail. I saw him regularly, and Winnie was quite clever in finding reasons why I should go and see her husband. I had to discuss with Nelson which school should the children go to, what subjects they should take.
Did you, by any chance, consider at the time that, given at the height of apartheid and the brutality of apartheid, that you were committing race, class, and profession suicide?
I didn't think that it was suicide. I philosophically was influenced by the first democratic countries, Constitution, Greece, and the Constitution of Solon. And part of that upbringing, and also what happened to my father, gave me an idea that, yes, you can be afraid, but don't let fear influence you from distinguishing right from wrong. And I had family support. When I got the threat from Foster, I had a brother, younger than me, who was in business. I didn't tell my wife about the threat from Foster. But I went to my brother and I told him, who had a business and he had a landlord. And I told him, well, if anything happens to me, make sure that you look after the family. And most brothers were saying, well, do you want to become involved? My brother's answer was that we may have to let the landlord of the business wait for his rent, but your family will not want. When I said that I was proud to be a leftist, the leaders of the Greek community went to my father and said, rein him in, he's bringing the Greek community in disrepute. And I asked my father, what did you say to them? I said to them that you are over 20 and it's not for me to tell him what to say. So I think that my family, my grandfather was a Democrat, anti-royalist in Greece, despite the fact that his first son, George, after whom I was named, was killed in 1917 on the Bulgarian border during the Balkan Wars. And he remained a Democrat. And he said, well, he was anti-royalist, and when the king was brought back, and Venizelos, who was the arch-democrat of the country, the airport in Athens is named after him. And it was a slogan in my party. The worst fear is to acknowledge that you are afraid. And I put it aside.
So what drove you? What are the things that you were hanging on to at the difficult period in your life, in the life of South Africans, but also in the life of the majority of black people who were being oppressed by the system? What drove you to?
I had a feeling for the oppressed. Historically, I was born in a province which the Spartans, the warlike people of ancient times, occupied. And even in primary school in Greece, I was taught how the Spartans, who were warriors, who occupied lands, they thought other people inferior. Made me question the authority of those in power. I thought, no, I will do what I think right. And you know that I didn't go to school, the school that I went to this morning, who honored me because it's now a different school, an all-black school. And I actually worked in a shop. The man who cleaned the floors was given a third of a loaf of bread, and there were cold meats and things. And he would come, I became his friend, and he would point to his stomach and he'd say, "Labile, I'm hungry." And I actually secretly cut cold meats out of the fridge of the shop and gave it to him. Another, the driver of the bus, became ill when I was ill. And the Greek doctor used to come every day, take my temperature and looked after me. Mm-hmm. And the wife of the boss asked the doctor to go to the other room in the backyard where I was sleeping to see Jim. And the Greek doctor, Greek because he came from Greece as a doctor and he practiced Greek, he said, no, I don't see black people. I could go upstairs to a shower because it was a block of flats. I had to fill a bucket of warm water for Jim to wash. And Jim said that he knew a black doctor who was president of the ANC. And the wife found Dr. Kuma. And Jim told me that he was from Alex and that he was a member of the ANC. And every Sunday they had meetings and Dr. Kuma came and addressed them from time to time. Wow. And he was called because I think he was one of the first doctors. But I never had any doubt that my identification of the women of the Bafaruzzi, who were the first to be given passes. The authorities thought, if we try to give the women of Johannesburg, they are going to protest and things. Let's go to the ignorant ones at Bafaruzzi. I spent months in Zeerust defending the Bafaruzzis. And the other people from the eastern part of the country. And I was impressed by the patience and the love for freedom of black people. And also the people that stood up as a result of the Soweto massacre. And I was impressed by the humanity of the black people that I represented. And I will never forget that after this Soweto massacre, 2 young people were detained for 90 days. And I was asked when they were released to go to the Pretoria prison and see them and defend them. There were the two of us, the 3 of us, shortly after their release from detention. The warder told me, how long are you going to be? And I said, well, quite long, because I had to take instructions. He said, well, the mother of one of them is here. I will send her away and tell her to come back. I said, no, please don't send her away. I could understand the mother who hadn't seen her son for more than 90 days and had come to Pretoria by train in order to see her son. I said, no, take him to his mother and I will work with the other. He went to see his mother. he came back with 2 oranges given to him by his mother. And he sat there whilst we were talking, and he peeled the orange, and he cut it into 3 portions, and he offered me a 3rd. And I said, you know, we've got a bag of oranges at home. Share it, the 2 of you. No, Mr. Bizos, you are with us in this. We have to share it with you. I think of the humanity of ordinary young people. I was expected by them to accept the 3rd of the orange. And I would tell my own children about this. And I think that I influenced them in order to have respect for the dignity of ordinary people, irrespective of their color, irrespective of their belief, irrespective of their background.
You describe the Constitution of South Africa, democratic Constitution of South Africa,
Yes.
as the bridge between the past, the present and the future.
Yes, that's true. I played a role together with Arthur Chaskelson, who founded the Legal Resources Center, where I have been working since '92. And shortly after the release of Nelson Mandela, I got a call from the present Vice President. George, I have been requested by President Mandela, President of the ANC, to ask you and Arthur Chaskelson to join the committee of the ANC to write the Constitution. And I asked Cyril, does that mean I have to take a card?
Membership card.
Yes. And he said, no, we don't want your 12 rands. And together with Arthur, we were agreed that we don't have to take part in political activity. We were lawyers. We must do our duty as lawyers. And I said to Cyril, and what do we have to do, Cyril? He said, everything. I said, everything, Cyril? He said, well, I'll try and get you an exemption from toy-toying. I have never toy-toyed. I speak my mind. I try to not to be judgmental. I don't use derogatory words for those that I think that are not really living up to what Nelson Mandela taught us and what he expected us to do. He has had a tremendous influence in my life. And we were friends for over 65 years.
Tell us about that. After more than close to 7 decades, that's the nature of your relationship with President Nelson Mandela. What was that what was the golden thread between you and him and your circle? Because you were quite a tough human rights group.
Well, you know, it started when we were students. He was ahead of me. He qualified. He became an attorney in '52. I became an advocate in '54. We used to see each other, even though he withdrew from Wits and the law faculty, because it's well known that the dean said that blacks can't be advocates. Get a diploma as an attorney.
Mm-hmm.
They set up Mandela and Tambo opposite the magistrate's court. There were things that we could not do together. We couldn't go to a tea room or a restaurant and eat or drink. I couldn't go to Soweto without a permit. And if you applied for a permit, you had to say to whom were you going to see and what for.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we nevertheless met together when he was a student and when he became an attorney. And I took an interest when he was charged with being part of the Defiance campaign. I went to court. I was still a student. Things were not as easy. You know that we packed the students. We packed the wide passage in the court, in the magistrate's court. And the authorities of the university, Wits University, took exception to the fact that some of us were wearing the university blazer. We were not allowed to show it during a protest. But we had to live with it. And sometimes, if you can't do things that you want to do, you become even stauncher than. He became an attorney. I became an advocate. He appeared before the magistrate of Tempton Park. I appear, Your Worship, for the accused. Who are you? My name is Nelson Mandela. I'm an attorney. Where is your certificate? I don't carry it with me. The magistrate turns around to the accused and says, I can't recognize the person that says that you're an attorney without seeing his certificate. You have the right to find another attorney, or you can conduct your own defense. And I will postpone the case. Nelson protested, but nevertheless the case was postponed. Nelson came to me and complained. I said, and he said he postponed the case to a date on which I'm not available. I'm in another case. I want you to take the case at Kempton Park. And I said, Nelson, I'll take the other case. You go back with your certificate. Show this magistrate that you can't treat me this way. And that happened. And what happened? Here's my certificate. The case starts. First witness, magistrate to the witness. I don't understand the question that this man has asked you. And I don't know that you understand it. You don't have to answer it. And so it went on. And Nelson said, Your Worship makes it very difficult for me to do my job. Just one moment. He writes something down. And he turns around to the accused and said, Your attorney has withdrawn. Nelson stood up and said, I have not withdrawn. I just ask you to stop interfering with my cross-examination. You know, I have written down on the record that you have withdrawn. It's a contempt of court to challenge the accuracy of the magistrate. The magistrate says, you don't have to be here. Nelson came up to my chambers and told me what happened. As young as I was, as an advocate, I said, is your client prepared to make an affidavit that he wants you to be his lawyer? And we'll then go to the Supreme Court and ask for the recusal of the magistrate. He says, funny that you should say this, George. My client, whom I gave a lift back to Johannesburg, told me, Mr. Mandela, I'm sorry that I'm putting you to this trouble, but I want you to do my case. I chose you. Needless to say, the accused was a black man.
What drove all of you to take these risks at such a high price?
For me, it wasn't a price. For me, it was a duty. And I was acting for people who had courage. Nelson Mandela, yes, let us go and review. We reviewed. The judge called us in, and the magistrate had appointed an advocate. And the judge didn't speak to me, spoke to the lawyer of the magistrate. What is your client up to? Everybody knows who Mandela is. What is this nonsense that you don't recognize him and ask for certificates? And what is this of interrupting the proceedings when he asks questions? And he says that he did not withdraw. Well, we want a postponement, said the lawyer, in order to show that he didn't believe he was an attorney because of the air with which he came in, as if he owned the place.
That's Nelson Mandela.
That's sorry. And
so was the perception at the time that he's got a greater authority over
no,
the
you
environment?
see, there was a Dlamini who was really the laughing stock of the black people, because he would bow down and touch the ground, as your worship pleases. You know, Today, I suppose they would call him a coconut, but but you know,
You would call him a?
a coconut. No, the black people would call him a coconut. This was a Dlamini one. Then Nelson Mandela was not a Dlamini. And what did the judge do? Tell your client to get off that bench and to behave himself. That's it. Godfrey Peachy, who became an attorney, article to Mandela at Tambo. He went, and the magistrate said, "You see that table there and that chair? That's for blacks. Go and sit there." Godfrey Peachy was quite a man. He was an academic. He gave up Fort Hare in order to become an attorney. And he stood up and said, "Why should I go to a separate table? This is where lawyers stand when they talk to you." And the Court of Appeal said that the magistrate had a right to provide separate tables. And Godfrey Peachy was fined £5 for not moving. And he was jailed because he refused to pay the £5. But one of his friends went and paid, the £5, and we went to the Court of Appeal and failed. And I felt that the way that Nelson Mandela and Godfrey Peachy and Douglas Lukela and the other black practitioners were treated was an insult to me. And I was prepared to act in cases which some people said that should really be taken by more senior members of the bar. In fairness to some, Izzy Maisel, Sidney Kentridge, and others, if I went to them with a case like Maisel's, who a tailor from Malawi lived in Alex. He made a living out of making clothes for people. He didn't have proper papers. He was arrested. And they were made by the potato peelers in consultation with the police and the prosecutors, that they could sign a contract to pick potatoes for 4 months and they wouldn't be jailed for not having proper papers.
Given the experience of the time and the role that all of you played, on the one hand, working within the system, a legal system, but also undermining the system. Trying to undermine the apartheid legal system. What are the lessons from that period to South Africa today, for its leaders, whether they're in business, whether they're political, whether they're in government, whether they're in social movements?
I believe that Nelson Mandela showed the way. When he was a prisoner, he made friends with the warders who smuggled books and did other things, not only for Nelson Mandela, but other political prisoners. When they sent him to Pollsmoor, thinking that he would take personal liberty for himself, and he made a public statement, I want to be the last political prisoner that is released in South Africa. Don't try and buy me by telling me you send me to the Transkei and then you'll allow me to the independent Transkei. And when he was sent to Pollsmoor in '85, it is not very well known that secret negotiations started between Kubi Coetzee and Nelson Mandela. Nelson called me to Pollsmoor when he was actually in hospital. He told me that the Minister of Justice, Kubi Coetzee, came. And he wanted to know whether there was some way in which we can find one another. And I told him in no uncertain terms that I was a member, that Nelson Mandela was a member of an organization that had a president, Oliver Tambo. He was not prepared to take any decisions which were not endorsed by the ANC in exile, and that he wanted me to go to Lusaka and to talk to Oliver and to talk to Hani. He was not prepared to do anything secret from his people. His organization had to come with him. I did that. And I went to Lusaka, and I went to London, and I came back, and I spoke to Coetzee. And actually I had a bit of a problem because Coetzee said, my president doesn't know anything about what I'm doing. I didn't believe him. But I also was scared that when I came back from Zambia, the security police may be at the airport. What were you doing in Zambia? What did you discuss with Oliver Tambo and Hani? And this is why I actually, in going to see Coetzee, I took Johan Krichler with me, so that if Coetzee denied that he had authorized my leaving.
Did he pay for your trip to go to Lusaka? Who paid for that?
The attorney of record at the time was who kept money for Nelson, which was paid to Ayob. Ayob paid for the travel, and actually with one of the trips he came together with me, because the wise Krichler said, if they want to play any games with you, you must be able to say that you didn't do it because you were a supporter of the ANC, because you got a brief from an attorney to go and visit a client. And what happened was that Nelson, when he was transferred to Victor Verster, I visited there, he actually we had lunch there. The warder was and his son with his cook and his waiter, and he was allowed on the doctor's orders to have a glass of wine. And he said to them, George Bizos is coming. There will not be enough wine. And the warder said, you know, Mr. Mandela, George Bizos won't drink the semi-sweet wine that you are drinking. Oh, he said. And there was a banking account for him. And he said, well, here is money. Go and buy 3 bottles of wine for Mr. Bizos to choose what wine. And then Nelson told me that, watch it. Because when I asked them which of the 3 wines that they think you would drink, they pointed to a bottle. The one that you wanted when they brought it to you and told you choose, they chose the one that they knew you would choose, which means that they are watching you very. And then we learned that because we had secret things to talk about, we would go out of the house and go on the path around the house. And what did we learn after the event? That they had bugged the flower beds so that they knew what we were discussing. But Nelson Mandela is the one who said South Africa belongs to the South African living in it. And where did it go? It wasn't something new. It was in the Freedom Charter. And he was genuine. And in the witness box, in the treason trial, I was there. Judge Becker, who was responsible for their acquittal, asked Nelson, Mr. Mandela, you know that the whites are afraid of giving in to your slogan of one man, one vote. You'll forgive me, but women didn't count in those days. One man, one vote. Are you prepared to settle for anything less? And Nelson said, my Lord, I'm here alone in the witness box. I can't give you an answer to that question. We have been knocking on the door of the deaf for over 50 years, and the white people have not responded. Put something on the table and we will consider it. There are people today who upset me, who say that Nelson Mandela shouldn't have settled.
Nelson Mandela shouldn't have settled.
There are people who say this. Mm-hmm. They are so wrong. I am a pretty serious student of history. What does it tell us? That bloody revolutions don't solve problems. They actually create problems. In France, it led to the dictatorship of Napoleon and to the wars that followed, that Napoleon as a leader thought that the world belonged to him. The revolutions in countries, the Soviet Revolution, created some serious problems.
You're saying there's many people who are upset that Mandela should have negotiated or settled.
Yes, because they say they say that we should really have defeated the white man because of the poverty of black people, the inequality, the land question. There are all important questions, and I don't think that we have done enough in order to solve our problems. But I think that they do not think how a civil war in South Africa would have put us back by a very long time without any benefits. You know that General Viljoen had 30,000 soldiers and police officers in order to stop the '94 election. It took the wisdom and courage of Nelson Mandela to call him to his house, in a house, and tell him, you are a general. You know that he had trouble with the government because they blamed him for helping Renamo. And they said that he did it on his own and not the government. Viljoen was no fool. He actually carried out instructions of Botha, but he told him that you stop this election, yes, you'll win, but it will be the death knell, not only of your people, but my people. Let us shake hands and try it and find a solution to our problems without a civil war. Why don't you form a party? Because you tell me that you speak for Afrikaner. The clerk tells me that he speaks for Afrikaner. The Conservative Party tells me that they're speaking for him. And the RVB says that they're speaking. Form a party and see what we do. And he did. He got one member of parliament himself. But we don't know when we say that we should have put the white man in his place, what would have been the net result? There would have been a bloody civil war. There was a civil war in Greece between the left and the right. The bringing of the king, having a democracy. More people died in that civil war than the war against the Axis powers. And they took the country over 30 years to find some sort of peace among itself.
How do you deal with, what would you advise South Africans, especially the youth, in dealing with matters of polarity? Because there's a deepening polarity that's currently happening as a result of poverty that you're saying, but also deepening inequalities.
Well, I think that we, whites and blacks, should really take seriously the unfinished business that we have to make. On the question of education, I support the peaceful protests of the young people of the country, because you need an annual income as a family, black or white, of approximately 400,000 rands in order to be able to pay taxes and afford to educate one of your children, and twice as much if you have two children that are at the university. It's just not acceptable. But they will ask, where does the money come from? The money that corruption has brought about. I think I have a goddaughter, half black, half white. White mother, black father. She did a text for a postgraduate degree at the University of Cape
University of?
Cape Town.
Cape Town.
The title is The Unpatriotic Black Bourgeoisie. There are very rich whites that are very comfortable and do nothing in order to contribute to the education, to the equality, to the employment of people. There are people involved in the three tiers of government who are corrupt. What I find encouraging is that people are coming forward to expose the corruption. I am disappointed that the prosecution, the police, and some of the people that have benefited from corrupt practices, to use a rugby expression, kick for touch. And they found touch 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, where nothing happens, but they are suspended and get full pay. How much money goes into that? Which, if a very small portion of it was put into alleviating the difficulties of poor people from educating their children at universities, we wouldn't have the problem that we have.
So how do we manage this complexity, this division that we find in society? Because
I think that we mustn't protest by burning or using violence. But don't let us keep quiet about it. Let people speak about their bosses, about their friends, or even if they can bring themselves, about members of their family, who actually are profiting from this lack of discipline. And to say that one political party or another are responsible is not helpful. I don't want to mention names. I'm very careful about it. But some of the people that are complaining about poverty, complaining about lack of education, complaining of being deprived of land, are close to people who have benefited from the corrupt practices. Let them speak out. Let them speak out, and let the prosecution, let the people that are in government or in organizations, voluntary organizations, discover, speak out, and let's bring to book the people who have benefited unlawfully. And
what is the democratic dividend for ordinary South Africans?
speak out. But, don't speak about slogans. Collect the evidence. Speak the truth. Dig it up. Support the Section 9 organizations. Support the prosecution authorities.
And that Section 9 organizations is Section 9 of the Constitution, like the Public Protector, the Auditor General.
The people whose job it is to make sure that things happen properly. I am at the Legal Resources Center. We actually don't charge fees to our clients. We actually help indigent people. We can't do it all. There are other organizations. I'm glad that big firms of attorneys have what they call a pro bono desk. A couple of their people say, no, we will work for the poor. Let that catch on. Let people be exposed. Some of the people who actually accuse others of abusing are abusers themselves.
Right.
Let's cover up for them. Democracy has difficulties, but it's still the best form of government that there is in the world.
Explain that to the youth. Democracy is the best form of government.
Yes, it has difficulties. People get elected that ought not to be elected. Well, yes, expose them. Talk about it. Don't blame the media for exposing it. For the benefit of your children and generations to come, try and stop the corrupt practices. And this is what we are doing. This is why the Constitutional Court was established. There are politicians who say there is government policy, the courts must not interfere with government policy. You know, there is a very important case called the Grootboom case, one of the first cases that the Constitutional Court spoke outright. The government opposed Mrs. Grootboom, whose shack and the shack of hundreds of others were broken down, and they had to take refuge on a football field outside Cape Town. And they had to make do with makeshift things. An application was brought against the government responsible for breaking down the shacks. The lawyers retained by the government put a volume that thick to say that we have a housing policy. It's not for the business of the court to tell us how this policy should take place. The great Arthur Chaskelson, the president of the Constitutional Court and later the Chief Justice, politely thanked them for the thick volume of the policy. And he asked a simple question. Please tell us on what page must we look at as to where these people, 800 or 900 of them, will sleep tonight. Which page must we look at? And of course the lawyers couldn't find the page in the very thick document, how the people whose shacks you've broken down, where they are going to sleep tonight. And the court found an answer. And to this day they say the courts are interfering with the policy of the government. Well, I think that the Constitutional Court and our courts generally have spoken about policy. And the example, the recent example of a man who was wanted by the International Court of Justice and against whom there is a warrant, to say, well, you know, he comes from an African state. We can't arrest him here. Never mind the fact that we are signed the Roman Statute. They say that we admit that they let him go. And they say African solutions for African problems. Which African solutions? Mugabe? The this, that, and the other, dictatorships who have no respect for fundamental human rights and don't care tuppence for the human rights enshrined in our Constitution as interpreted by our courts. But they say, oh, African solutions for African problems. Idi Amin, he was an African. What others who stay in power, never mind what their constitution may say, for 3 or 4 terms? Why don't we follow the example of Nelson Mandela, who was begged to take another period, term of office? And he made it quite clear publicly. I want to set an example for Africa. 1 term is enough. Let my people choose someone else.
Were you and Nelson Mandela, would you consider yourself President Nelson Mandela, Arthur Chalkinson, Piers Langa, Walter Sisulu, Owar Tambo, Govan Mbeki, Ahmad Kathrada, Andrew Mhlangeni, and many others during your generation? Would you say that all of you were leaders, servant leaders?
Well, I was offered a political job. I said, I'm not good for it. Nelson said, well, we'll make you a judge. I said to Nelson, Arthur Chaskelson is the best person to head the Constitutional Court. If you appoint me a judge, they'll say, oh, he's appointed his 2 lawyers. It's not good for you and not good for me. For people to be able to say that Mandela appointed his 2 lawyers. And then he said to me, this you can't refuse. It is an order. We have a problem with the judiciary, the old judiciary. You have experience of them. I want you to become my representative on the Judicial Service Commission. I couldn't deny that. And also, Langa, Osaneki, and others contributed to the writing of the Constitution. We, even before the ANC got a shell house, we got a room in a hotel in the center of the city for the Constitutional Committee. Nelson Mandela came to our meeting. He didn't stay, but he said, please write a constitution which is good and will protect everyone in the country. And the rights must be enjoyed by everyone. Not only what may benefit the African National Congress, which has played a very important role in the liberation. Every individual is entitled to the rights. And he lived it. And he expected people to actually follow his example. Let me give you another example. Shortly after his release, Bishop Tutu arranged for a service in the Cape Town cathedral. I went there.
The Anglican Cathedral in Cape Town.
The Anglican. At the end of the service, Tutu said, President Mandela, not president of the country, President Mandela will now address you. Unkosi Sikelel' iAfrika was sung by the choir at the end of the service. This was shortly after the election of Nelson Mandela as president. The choir sang Nkosi Sikelel' iAfrika. Nelson Mandela went to the bishop's podium and said, the South African national anthem has 4 verses. Let us all in here sing all 4 verses. And it took the wisdom of Nelson Mandela, of what it is that will unify us. And, you know, he took so many steps to say that there are no differences among us. Unfortunately, the economic position of black people, the job finding, the sharing of the wealth hasn't come about. But saying that the Constitution is responsible for some of the problems is something that I will never accept, and I hope that the people of South Africa will never accept, because Nelson Mandela sacrificed his life. He wasn't a religious man. But you know, in jail, there were 5 or 6 religious services. He attended each and every one of them in order to show that we don't make a difference whether a Xhosa or a Zulu or a Shangaan or a colored or an Indian or a Greek or anybody else. South Africa belongs to all those who live in it. That is not Mandela's words only. In the Freedom Charter, in the Constitution, let us try and make it a truthful and enforceable provision in our Constitution.
Sorry?
Yeah. I'm 88 years old. At the Legal Resources Center, we are surrounded by the cream of the crop from various universities because they actually want to learn about the Constitution. They want to be lawyers who actually are not there only for the rich. About 3 or 4 years ago, I tendered my retirement. And one of the young women asked, "George, why do you want to retire?" And I said, "Well, you know, my memory is not very good. I'm computer illiterate. I rely on you, you know, because I have law reports, but I don't have to go to them. I just remember something that was said by a judge in the 50s. In 2 seconds, here is the judgment of the online." And I said, "You know, you're actually feeding me." And she flattered me and said, "George, that what you may have forgotten, some of us have never learned. Stay where you are." And then, of course, it had to happen. Marikana takes place. And I immediately, because of the experience of the people who died in detention, call a physician to attend the post-mortem. We were there. We took pictures. These young people went and took pictures of the dead among the rocks. And you know, there was a dead man. No traditional weapons anywhere near him. The police bring the same photograph of the same man with no less than 4 traditional weapons, 2 on each side of him, which were obviously put after the event. So they say, well, that's the sort of thing that we want from you. Leave the rest to us. We are young and we can look it up in the... And this is where I find myself. But I have 3 sons, all 3 professionals. I have faith in them and even my grandchildren. They will not follow what is said. They will analyze it. And I think that our people, and particularly the young, are smarter than some of us oldies think. And I rely on them. And as far as I can, I will continue supporting them.
My last 2 questions to you is, the South African solution at a certain moment was the sunset clause that will allow a degree of continuity of the people that work in the apartheid civil service into the new democratic state, but also around other property and other arrangements. You got into that debate where some were saying it was Joe Slovo who came up with sunset clause. You contested it, saying President Nelson Mandela came up with that sunset clause. Can you shed some light on what is the sunset clause And who was the inventor, if you like, of the sunset clause? Explain to South Africans, what is the sunset clause?
Well, you know, to say that Nelson Mandela or Joe Slovo, there's an answer to the question. Nelson Mandela did not take any serious decision on his own. Nelson Mandela knew that Joe Slovo wanted guerrilla warfare in the early 60s. He knew that there were people in the Black consciousness movement, even though he had a lot of respect on what has become the hero of the Black consciousness movement, Biko. He was there when, and I was there when the statue of Biko was put up. But he consulted. He weighed up what are the alternatives. One of the things that was a matter of great difficulty was, what do you do with the people who are a mere 15% of the population, that's the whites, who own the land, own the money, govern the stock exchange, do this, that, and the other. What do you do? And quite frankly, do you do what Mugabe did? And where did it get Mugabe and the people of Zimbabwe? And do we want to go on the same road? And the answer, he was a man who could persuade. The idea of the sunset clauses was discussed in a hotel near Shell House. I was there. Dlamini Zuma was there. Joe Slovo was presiding. And Dlamini Zuma says, Comrade Joe, what is this that we hear about sunset clauses? And Comrade Joe says, you know, it's quite complicated for lawyers. Comrade George will explain. And I explained, you know, very simply, that there are things that are too difficult that you can not cut the knife and say, this is it, this is what we want. But there are sunset clauses that things are provided, but for a period of time. And I sat down. And Dlamini Zuma says, Comrade Joe, I heard what Comrade George says, but we're relying on you that there should be more sunrises than sunset clauses. And everybody laughed, of course. But it was something that we could not avoid. A bloody revolution was the alternative. And some of us had bitter experiences about bloody revolutions. Could I give you a personal example?
The example of the sunset clause.
No, what I'm going to say is of what happens if you don't have sunset clauses and you do not have agreements. My mother's brother became a freedom fighter during the German occupation. He was anti-royalist. He was a Democrat. He was put into the equivalent of the island, on an island.
Of an island.
Equivalent to called the Long Island.
The Long Island.
When I saw him in '72, he was an ardent communist. I asked him, how come you became a communist? And he said, when I was fighting for the country as a liberal, as liberty. But then, when the king came, I was an anti-loyalist. They took me and they put me in jail, which was full of professors who knew a lot about communism. And that's where I became a communist. That was my eldest brother. My father's sister was married to a man who became a collaborator with the Germans. And you can imagine that when there was the civil war in Greece, the bitterness was something undescribable. They left, ambushed, 32 young men gathered by my father's sister's husband to fight the freedom fighters. And they executed them and threw their bodies into a well. And now the two uncles are still in the village. Their children are family friends, except these two. I went with one of my cousins from Athens to the village. My left uncle was with two others. We joined them, and they ordered coffee for us. And the man that is considered the traitor to the Germans came down the road and saw his son sitting. And his son got up and embraced his father. He went and sat at a different table. I greeted him and I offered him coffee. Eleni was the woman that was running. When we drank the coffee, I said, Eleni, take for 6 coffees. My left ankle took my hand and banged it on the table and said, Eleni, come here. Take for 5 coffees. He was not prepared to associate himself with the enemy more than 35 years after the event. These are the lessons that I learned about civil wars and about non-compromises. And Nelson Mandela and I discussed these matters. We were friends. We didn't try to influence one another. He had started reading Greek texts in jail because Alexander and Cathadra and others registered with UNISA on subjects. And they say, look, these are prescribed books. And Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, Cathadra, and others became people who wanted a peaceful settlement.
What was my last two questions to you? I know I said earlier my last two questions. What was the significance of the women's struggle in the broader scheme of
What struggle?
the women's struggle and the leaders in the broader scheme of fighting against the atrocities of your brutal apartheid system? Why is that underplayed?
Well, you know, I don't know that Nelson underplayed it. He was very proud of Albertina Sisulu. You know that his first marriage broke up because his first wife wanted him to make a choice: politics or their marriage. He was very proud of Winnie's attempt to resuscitate the African National Congress. I defended her together with 21 others, and she was acquitted. There were 3 women. There were 2, Winnie and another 2. One of them a senior journalist, and one from Alex also. Nelson didn't underestimate the women's role in the struggle. Yes, the slogans were male slogans: one man, one vote, and so on. But they actually, Nelson and Walter and the others, welcomed the contribution that women made when they refused to take passes. They considered that really, and you know, the Bafarutsi women thought that, you know, the country people, they called the chief to tell them that on Monday they had to gather in order to be photographed and take passes. The chief of the Bafarutsi said, in the presence of the chief native commissioner from Potchefstroom and the brigadier of the police and a couple other colonels that came and stood with the chief who spoke Setswana. And you know what he said? I didn't call you here. They that are next to me have called you. They told me to tell you that you must turn up to take passes. It's not me that is telling. Well, some did turn up. They made a very serious mistake, the authorities. They said, take off your doek. The women of Bafarutsi never took their doeks off. And anyway, they managed to issue 6,000 passes. The men from Johannesburg came, 20 of them that I had to defend. And among them, 3 or 4 women from Johannesburg who went there and said, on Sunday, bring all your passes, there will be a big fire and we will burn them. And this is what happened. So women were not considered not contributing to the similar thing happened with the people in the Eastern Transvaal and in the Eastern Cape. And
so why are we having a conversation in South Africa about should South Africa have a woman president? Why are we having a conversation? Is that a vexatious conversation?
well, you know, to give effect that it should be, it's time that it should be a woman, has got to be examined. What do we really need? Have we got a woman who will make a good president? Or is it in the interests of the country that we should say that we must exclude all men, however suitable they may be? It's an illogical thing. Time will tell. To make it a precondition, I don't think is a democratic. Mm-hmm. If you make it precondition, you're actually excluding men who may well be ideal persons to succeed President Zuma. But to exclude women because they are women is equally wrong. We have to say, this is the situation, what is the best for the country, and allow the country to, don't make it a precondition. Because a precondition is, you know, that this talk that Mrs. Mugabe is going to be president in in Zimbabwe, and it's said that she's got a qualification, a doctorate from a university, without actually having attended.
A thesis in?
Any university. But one has to be careful about cutting out people who are properly qualified, and you would exclude half the population from actually having this show.
This award that you received today on the 27th of November 2015, Lifetime Award from a Melbourne primary school.
Yes.
The school awarded it to you.
Yes.
What's your historic and present relationship with the school?
I haven't made a secret of the fact that I went to that school for my 6 and 7, and that I was taken away from a shop by a teacher there. I also am the founding chairman of Saheti School,
Yes.
which now has 1,300 pupils. And I didn't keep a secret, and a matter of pride in my book and when I speak, that I am a refugee, and I was actually welcomed and properly treated by this school. The headmaster heard about it, and he started inviting me. And also, Malvern now is almost exclusively black.
From A? Was it from?
From preschool to 7.
Was it historically a white school?
Only white.
Only white.
When I was there.
Okay.
Now it's all black.
All black.
But white, Indian, colored staff. And the two schools came together quite by chance. The vice principal is an Indian woman. The principal is a colored man. There are white teachers, there are black teachers, African teachers. The language is English, but they sing Xhosa and other languages. But I think Zulu is a compulsory subject. But for one reason or the other, the two schools exchange visits, and we encourage Saheti to admit children without having regard of their color or religion. There is only one prerequisite. You've got to learn Greek. And I was very pleased that I heard that a Portuguese father and an Italian mother sent their 2 children to school. And I happened to be sitting at the same table with the mother, who's an attorney. And I heard that their children call themselves Greek. So I asked her, how do you and your husband feel about your children calling themselves Greek? And she said, no, we don't have a problem with that. There's another problem that we're actually concerned with. They're teenagers. And you know, teenagers have secrets from their parents. And they sit there and they talk Greek. And you know what? Hani, I don't know if you know that. Chris Hani was a classical scholar. Didn't discuss it with me, even though we met in Zambia and played. But he sent his 2 daughters to Sahete school. Their father was killed on the Saturday before Holy Week of the Orthodox Church. And there is a service every night of the week. And what happened is that the Greek girls, because they didn't want to go back to the house where their father was killed, said, okay, come and stay with us during this week. And recently I heard that one of his grandchildren is at Sahete school. The kindergarten, the preschool. And all of a sudden I saw Mrs. Hani there, among the important visitors. And I went and sat next to her. And I asked her, oh, I heard that you are now a grandmother at the school. And she says, oh no, I'm no longer a grandmother. I'm now a yaya. Which is the Greek for grandmother. So you see, so she hears all the other children talking about the yaya. So we've also got a yaya. I've got a yaya as well. So and we both laughed, you see, because, and this is how they say, I have spoken to the children at the school. And my theme with all young people is that South Africa is yours. And I am actually surprised today. I said, I am a refugee, but I asked the vice principal who arranged for me to go there. If I say I am a refugee, will the children, are there refugees? Yes, we have quite a number. If I say I'm a refugee, do I have to explain what a refugee is? I said, no. So I tried out. I said, I am a refugee. Are there any other refugees, children of refugees here? And what my theme is, South Africa belongs to all. And the Minister of Culture invited me for yesterday, and today I said, sorry, I have to go to the school, but I spoke with the function by the Minister of Culture. What did I read? Sections 30 and 31 of the Constitution. This is what it says. In the preamble, South Africa belongs to all, and everybody has these rights. Everybody. Section 30 and Section 31. It became a matter of discussion for the whole day of the debate of what is culture, what is Ubuntu, what is this, what is that, what is the other. And I actually tell them to avoid generalizations. And I quote a judge in England in the beginning of the 20th century, that generalizations are the product of vulgar minds.
Generalization?
Generalization is the evidence of vulgar minds. Because if you say Greeks are that, blacks are that, whites are that, Afrikaners are that, and I quote Nelson Mandela, who at the first Brown Fisher lecture said, I had the benefit of having my people behind me. Brown Fisher was not accepted by his people. But despite his non-acceptance, this is what he did for our liberation. So don't put people on the same, and there is a tendency. There are people who say the whites are to blame. It's not only the whites that are to blame for our economic state. Yes, it is true that they own most of the land. But to say, cut up the land into 10 portions and give it to your workers, the way the Mugabe has done. I have an answer. I traveled to Lesotho through Free State. The amount of land which is fallow, which is not used, is too much for an eye to see. Why don't we have a law? If you are the owner of land, you've got to pay taxes on it. You don't have to pay taxes here. In Europe, you have to. If you own land, you've got to make use of it.
Yeah.
If it's fallow land, and you're not prepared to produce on it, we will expropriate it. And we will not. The Constitution says you must have regard what use is being made of the land before you actually value it. So you can't go to a man who's got a vineyard in the Cape and said, cut it up. Let's have a look. What fallow land is there? Let us bring water to it. Let us bring electricity to it. Let us, if it's fallow land, take it over.
What went through your head at the time when you redrafted a part of President Mandela's speech in the doc? You changed that part to "if needs be."
Yes.
What went through the heads of all of you at that time? If needs be, it's a quick one.
You know that Socrates was sentenced to death by a majority of the people of Athens. You were tried by 500 chosen citizens for not being patriotic. And generally speaking, they sent you into exile. And some of the best people were sent away from Athens because they were not toe the line. By majority, Socrates was sentenced to death. Timon, his pupil, went to him and said, "We'll get you to escape." He refused. He said, "I've been telling everybody to obey the law. What will they say now? Look at Socrates. He doesn't respect the majority." And I told Nelson, when Socrates was given, he had the right, if it was proposed that he should be put to death, to suggest a different, and usually they'd say, "I will go into exile for 10 years.
Mhm.
And I said, if Socrates said, "Okay, I'll go away from Athens, will not dictate to you what you should do that I have done all my life," he would probably have saved his life. And the way you put it, that I am prepared to die, the judge and the government will say, he challenged us. "No," said Nelson. "I've said that I'm prepared to die so often in Soweto, in Alex, in Sophiatown, and if I don't say it now, they'll say, 'Hey, Nelson, you've weakened.'" I said, "Please, you'll be accused of challenging. I'm going to have suggest a compromise." He said, "Yes." I said, "Just put the words, 'if needs be,' in." He said, "I'm prepared to do that. Thank you." But Joel Joffe, who wrote a book, the first book about Rivonia, praises me as a strategist in the book. And that really probably saved Nelson's and the other lives. I think that I don't deserve that. I know why the death sentence was not passed. The night before, I went to the Consul General's office to consult with Alan Payton, who was going to give evidence in mitigation. And when Payton left with his wife to go upstairs, the Consul General saw me to the door and said, "George, don't worry, there won't be a death sentence. And Bernstein is going to be acquitted." And this is exactly what happened. I told the story to Sampson, who authorized Anthony Sampson. I wrote this. Sampson went and found who was this Consul General And what did he find out? That he was a senior MI-15. And I inferred from that he and the British and the Americans who were doing business with South Africa knew about Nelson Mandela and Rivonia because Russia, the Eastern countries, France, Germany, America, United Kingdom, Australia, were sending telegram after telegram to the registrar of the court, and he would give it to us. Release Mandela, release the Rivonia people. And I believe that the Americans and the British, and probably also the French, said that we find it very difficult to silence our people, and particularly the young people of the world, that if they are executed, we will be forced to stop business with you. And I think that Verwoerd and others, never mind the big words, that we were going to, if the judge sentenced them to death, we were going to execute them, was a bit of bravado. They actually decided that it was counterproductive to their future if they actually sentenced them to death.
Advocate Bizos, thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Thank you.